Billionaire does something romantic for the maid, fiancé explodes, viewer wants to know what happened next. Wait, before you scroll away. I need you to see this. A billionaire clips a diamond necklace around his maid's neck in the middle of his own engagement party. His fiancée walks in. And in 3 seconds, her face goes from confusion, to rage, to something that looks a lot like fear. Because deep down, she already knows what that necklace means. She just prayed no one would ever find out. Stay with me. This story is about to get unbelievable. Hey everyone, welcome back. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop your country in the comments, I'd love to know who's here with me. Today's story is one of the most emotional ones I've told, about love that isn't loud, promises that outlive the people who make them, and a woman who never asked for any of this, but got it anyway. Let's get into it. Nobody in that mansion knew Maya Bennett's name until the night everything changed. At 34 years old, Maya had learned to move through rooms like she wasn't in them. That was the first rule of working in a house like the Cole estate. 22 bedrooms, a staff of 11, and a family whose net worth could buy a small country. You didn't speak unless spoken to. You didn't make eye contact with guests. You definitely didn't let anyone see you sweat, even when you were on your third double shift of the week. She'd been the head housekeeper of the Cole estate for almost 2 years, ever since she answered a job posting that specifically asked for someone with caregiving experience. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. A rich family needed help managing their household and looking after an aging matriarch. Maya needed steady work that let her also help raise her younger brother, Caleb, who was finishing community college 2 towns over. It seemed simple. It was never simple. The house belonged to Ethan Cole, 34 years old, CEO of Cole Meridian Group, a real estate and technology empire his father built from nothing and that Ethan had somehow made even bigger. Forbes called him ruthless. Business Insider called him untouchable. The tabloids called him a lot of things, most of them about his money, his face, or the woman he was about to marry. Vanessa Hale was 30 years old, stunning in the specific way that photographed well from every angle, and engaged to Ethan for exactly 11 months. She was the daughter of a hotel dynasty, raised in the same rarefied world Ethan lived in, and to everyone watching from the outside, they were the perfect match. 2 beautiful, wealthy people who understood each other's world. Maya had learned, in her 2 years working in that house, that the version of Ethan Cole the world saw and the version who existed inside those walls were not the same man. The public Ethan was cold. Calculated. A man who answered questions in headlines, not sentences. The private Ethan was the man who, 8 months ago, sat by his dying mother's bedside every single night for 6 weeks straight, holding her hand while machines beeped around them, refusing to let anyone else take the night shift. Not the nurses. Not Vanessa, who visited exactly twice. Maya had been there too. Because before she was the head housekeeper, she'd been the one person Eleanor Cole trusted to care for her in those final months, when the cancer took more of her each week. Maya had fed her, read to her, sat with her through the worst nights, and somewhere in all of that, she had become something the Cole family didn't have a name for. Not quite staff. Not quite family. Something in between, built entirely out of the small, unglamorous acts nobody photographs. Eleanor Cole had died on a Tuesday morning in March, with Ethan on one side of the bed and Maya on the other. Nobody had planned for what came after. Tonight, the estate was being transformed for the engagement party. The official one, the kind with 300 guests, a string quartet, and enough white orchids to fill a florist's entire inventory for a month. Maya had been up since 5 a.m. directing the setup, smoothing tablecloths, correcting the caterers, making sure every detail was flawless for the woman who was about to become the next Mrs. Cole. She told herself it didn't bother her, watching the house get dressed up for someone else's happiness. She told herself a lot of things lately. Around 6 in the evening, as the first guests' cars started crunching up the gravel drive, Ethan found her in the east hallway, checking the flower arrangements outside the ballroom. Maya. His voice was quiet. Different than the voice he used with the caterers or the event planners. Can you come to my study after the toast? There's something I need to give you. She blinked. Give me. It's important. He held her gaze a beat longer than he needed to. It was my mother's. Before she could ask anything else, one of the event coordinators called his name from the ballroom, and he was gone, swallowed back into the swirl of tuxedos and photographers setting up for the biggest night of his public life. Maya stood alone in the hallway, her heart doing something strange and unfamiliar in her chest. Whatever this was, she had a feeling it was about to change everything. She hadn't always been just the housekeeper to Eleanor Cole. That part of the story, nobody at the party tonight would ever know. 2 years ago, Maya had answered a caregiving job listing while working 2 other jobs just to keep the lights on in the small apartment she shared with Caleb. Their mother had passed when Maya was 26, leaving her the only parent Caleb, 8 years younger, had left. There'd been no time to grieve properly. There'd only been time to work. The interview with Eleanor Cole had lasted 3 hours, not because Eleanor was testing her, but because Eleanor was lonely, and something about Maya's steady, unhurried kindness made the older woman want to keep talking. You remind me of myself, Eleanor had told her that first day, gripping Maya's hand with surprising strength for a woman already fighting late-stage illness. Before all this, she gestured vaguely at the marble floors, the chandeliers, the wealth that surrounded her like a gilded cage. I didn't grow up like this either. Over the following 18 months, Maya became the one constant in Eleanor's shrinking world. She learned which stories Eleanor liked to repeat, which songs calmed her on the worst nights, exactly how she liked her tea when her stomach couldn't handle much else. She learned that Eleanor Cole, feared and admired across every boardroom her late husband ever built, cried most nights not from pain, but from missing the son who worked too much and the future daughter-in-law who visited too little. Vanessa is polished, Eleanor said once, in a rare unguarded moment near the end. But polish isn't the same as good, sweetheart. I've learned the difference the hard way. Maya had said nothing. It wasn't her place. Now, back in the present, the ballroom buzzed with 300 of the city's wealthiest guests, all here to celebrate Ethan and Vanessa's engagement. Maya moved through the edges of the room in her uniform, adjusting a runner here, refilling a champagne tower there, invisible in the way staff were trained to be. Vanessa found her near the kitchen entrance around 8 o'clock. You. Vanessa's voice had the practiced sweetness of someone used to being obeyed, with something sharper underneath. The centerpieces on table 6 are crooked. Fix it. And tell the band we need less strings, more energy, this isn't a funeral. Of course, Maya said, already moving. And Maya, Vanessa's eyes flicked over her, cold and assessing. Try to stay out of the photographed areas tonight. We don't need staff in the background of press shots. It wasn't cruelty exactly. It was worse, the casual indifference of someone who genuinely didn't see Maya as a person capable of being hurt by the comment. Ethan, crossing the room with 2 board members trailing behind him, caught the tail end of it. Something flickered across his face, controlled, but unmistakable. He didn't say anything in front of the guests. But 20 minutes later, as Maya adjusted the last centerpiece on table 6, he appeared beside her. She didn't mean it the way it sounded, he said quietly, which both of them knew wasn't entirely true. It's fine, Maya said. I've been called worse. You shouldn't have to be called anything. He glanced toward the terrace doors, where Vanessa was laughing with a cluster of photographers, radiant and camera-ready. Come find me after the toast. Please. She nodded, and he disappeared back into the crowd of people who all wanted a piece of him. An hour later, after the champagne toast, after Vanessa's father gave a speech about 2 empires becoming one, Ethan slipped away from his own party and found Maya near the coat room. In his hand was a small, worn velvet box, not the polished, boutique kind Vanessa's engagement ring had come in, but something older. Something that had clearly been kept and cared for over decades. My mother wanted you to have this, he said, holding it out. She made me promise. Before she died, she made me promise I would give this to you myself, and that I would do it properly. Not slip it to you quietly like something to be ashamed of. Maya's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a diamond necklace unlike anything she'd ever held. Delicate, timeless, clearly worth more than she'd earn in a decade. "Ethan, I can't." "You can," he said. "And tonight, you're going to wear it. In front of everyone." Maya looked up at him, searching his face for a joke, an explanation, anything. She found only quiet, unshakable certainty. Whatever was about to happen, he had already decided it was worth it. The foyer of the Cole mansion was the kind of space designed to make people feel small: soaring ceilings, a sweeping marble staircase, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the manicured grounds outside like a painting. It was also, Maya would later think, a terrible place to have the most important conversation of her life, because there was nowhere to hide. "Ethan, please think about this," she whispered, still clutching the open velvet box. "This isn't just a necklace. People will talk. Vanessa will." "Vanessa needs to understand something," Ethan said, gently taking the necklace from the box. "My mother's wishes don't disappear just because they're inconvenient for someone else's evening." He stepped behind her. Maya's breath caught as his fingers brushed the back of her neck, carefully clasping the necklace into place. In the reflection of the darkened window across the foyer, she could see the two of them standing there, a billionaire in a tailored navy suit and a maid in a burgundy uniform, her hand pressed instinctively to her chest as the weight of the diamonds settled against her collarbone. For one suspended moment, neither of them said anything. It didn't feel scandalous. It felt like something being returned to where it belonged. Then the front doors opened. Vanessa stood there in a shimmering rose-gold gown, having stepped outside for photos with late-arriving guests. She froze mid-step, her smile collapsing in real time as she took in the scene in front of her. Ethan's hand still near Maya's throat, the open velvet box on the side table, the unmistakable glitter of diamonds Vanessa herself had never seen before on a woman wearing a maid's uniform. "What," Vanessa said, her voice climbing, "is going on here?" "Vanessa," Ethan started. "Don't." She crossed the foyer in 3 sharp strides, her heels striking the marble like gunshots. "Don't you dare Vanessa me. You're standing in the middle of your own engagement party, putting jewelry on the housekeeper. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what I'm supposed to think, Ethan. Because from where I'm standing, my fiancé just gave another woman a diamond necklace in our foyer, in front of 300 of our guests who are one open door away from seeing this exact moment." Maya's hands went instinctively to the clasp, desperate to undo it, to disappear, to make this stop. "I'll give it back, I never wanted." "No." Ethan's voice cut through the foyer, steady and absolute. "You're not giving anything back." Vanessa let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Excuse me. This wasn't my idea, Vanessa. This necklace belonged to my mother. Before she died, she made me promise, not asked, promised, that I would give it to Maya myself, in front of people, not hidden away like a secret. That was her wish. Her exact words. Your mother's dead, Ethan. She doesn't get a say in our engagement party." The words landed like a slap. Even Vanessa seemed to hear how they sounded the moment they left her mouth, because a flicker of something, not quite regret, but recognition, passed over her face. "My mother," Ethan said quietly, "spent the last 6 months of her life being cared for by a woman who showed up every single day, held her hand through chemotherapy, sang to her when the pain got so bad she couldn't sleep, and sat with her the night she died because you were at a spa in Aspen. So no, Vanessa. I don't think my mother's wishes expired the moment she stopped breathing." The foyer went completely silent except for the distant hum of the party still going on obliviously in the ballroom. Vanessa's face had gone pale, her eyes darting between Ethan and Maya, searching for some angle, some way to reclaim control of a moment that had spiraled entirely out of her hands. "There's a letter," Ethan added, his voice dropping. "My mother left one. My lawyer has it. I was going to wait until after tonight to explain everything properly. But since you're demanding an explanation right now, in the middle of a party. What letter? Vanessa's voice had lost its edge, replaced by something closer to alarm. What are you talking about, Ethan? Maya, standing frozen between them with a dead woman's diamonds around her neck, realized she had absolutely no idea what was coming next either. The library, usually reserved for board meetings and quiet reading, became the unlikely stage for the truth to finally come out. Ethan had pulled Maya and Vanessa away from the foyer before any guests wandered in, and now the three of them stood beneath the tall bookshelves while Ethan retrieved a sealed envelope from the estate's safe. The same envelope his mother's attorney had handed him the week after her funeral, with strict instructions not to open it until the right moment presented itself. Tonight, apparently, was that moment. Ethan broke the seal and unfolded 2 pages of his mother's handwriting, unmistakably hers even in its shakier, illness-weakened form. He read it aloud. Eleanor's letter began simply, an apology to Ethan for not saying certain things while she still had the strength to say them clearly. And then it explained. Maya Bennett, the letter said, was not simply staff. In her final year of life, as Eleanor watched her son prepare to marry a woman who visited twice in 6 months and complained about the smell of the hospital when she did, she had watched a different woman show up every single day without complaint, without performance, without ever once mentioning what it might mean for her future. Eleanor wrote that she had, in her final weeks, quietly amended a portion of her personal estate. Not the company, not Ethan's inheritance, but her own private trust, money entirely separate from Cole Meridian Group that she had built and controlled herself over 40 years. A portion of it, along with several pieces of jewelry including the necklace now around Maya's neck, had been left directly to Maya. Not as payment. As gratitude, freely given, the kind Eleanor said she'd rarely received in her own life of wealth and appearances. But the letter didn't stop there. Eleanor wrote about a visit from Vanessa in her final month, one Ethan had never known about, because it happened on a day he'd been called into an emergency board meeting. Vanessa had come to the house not to see Eleanor, but to ask, gently at first and then less gently, whether Eleanor might consider formalizing some things before she passed. Meaning, whether she might adjust her will to ensure Vanessa's future position in the family was financially secured beyond just marriage, in case anything ever happened to Ethan. Eleanor wrote that she'd smiled and said she'd think about it. And then, the moment Vanessa left, she'd called her lawyer and asked him to draft the letter Ethan was now holding. I don't expect you to understand why I'm doing this the way I am, Eleanor's letter concluded. But I've spent my whole life watching people confuse politeness for kindness and confidence for character. Maya never once asked me for anything. Not once, in 18 months, did she ask what she might get from caring for a dying old woman. That is worth more to me than every dollar in every account we own. Take care of her, Ethan. Not because I'm asking you to fall in love, though I suspect I already know how you feel, but because good people are rare, and the ones who show up quietly, without an audience, deserve to be seen. Just once. Properly. In the light, not the shadows. The library was silent when Ethan finished reading. Vanessa's face had drained of all color. She was testing me, she finally said, barely above a whisper. That whole visit, she was testing me. No, Ethan said quietly. She wasn't testing you, Vanessa. She was just paying attention. There's a difference. Maya stood frozen, one hand pressed against the necklace at her throat, tears sliding silently down her face. She hadn't cried when Eleanor died, she'd been too busy holding everyone else together, including Ethan. Now, standing in this library with the truth laid bare in Eleanor's own shaking handwriting, 18 months of grief finally broke loose all at once. I need to go, Vanessa said abruptly, backing toward the door. I need air. She left the library at a near run, her rose-gold gown catching the light as she disappeared into the hallway, leaving Ethan and Maya alone with the letter, the necklace, and 300 unsuspecting guests still celebrating an engagement that had just quietly begun to collapse. By midnight, the party had ended in a strange, hollow way. guests slowly trickling out with confused whispers after Vanessa never returned to the ballroom, and Ethan gave a brief, tight-lipped excuse about a family matter before the staff began clearing 300 untouched dessert plates. Maya found herself in the estate's kitchen near 1 in the morning, still in her uniform, the necklace finally unclasped and sitting in its velvet box on the counter in front of her, like something too heavy to keep wearing. "You should be resting," Ethan said, appearing in the doorway. He'd changed out of his suit jacket, sleeves rolled up, looking more like the man who used to sit with his mother at 3 a.m. than the CEO who ran board meetings. "I should be packing," Maya said quietly. "I think it's better if I resign. Effective immediately." "Maya." "Ethan, look at what happened tonight." Her voice cracked slightly. "Your engagement is falling apart in front of the entire city, and it's because of me. Because of a necklace I never asked for, from a will I didn't know existed. I'm not going to be the reason your life gets torn apart. I've caused enough." "You didn't cause any of this." He crossed the kitchen and gently pushed the velvet box back toward her. "My mother caused this, if you want to assign blame, because she saw something true and decided it mattered more than keeping the peace. And honestly, Vanessa caused the rest of it, the moment she walked into a dying woman's bedroom asking about money instead of asking how she felt. People are going to say I manipulated a sick, dying woman for money," Maya said, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "They're going to say I'm exactly what Vanessa is being accused of." "Then we'll tell them the truth," Ethan said simply. "The whole truth. Because the truth is you showed up for 18 months without once mentioning what you might get out of it, and the woman who did ask about money isn't the one wearing the necklace tonight." Maya let out a shaky breath, some of the tension in her shoulders easing slightly, though not entirely. "I don't want to be a headline, Ethan. I don't want to be the maid who trapped the billionaire. I've spent my whole life trying to be invisible in rooms like this, and now I'm the center of a scandal I never asked to be part of." "You're not going to be a headline," Ethan said. "You're going to be exactly what my mother saw you as, someone who deserves to stop hiding." He picked up the velvet box and held it out to her again, this time not as a symbolic gesture in front of an audience, but quietly, privately, just between the two of them. "Keep it," he said. "Not because I'm telling you to. Because she wanted you to have it, and because you earned it in every way that actually matters. Whatever happens next, with Vanessa, with the company, with any of it, that part isn't in question." Maya looked down at the box in her hands for a long moment before finally closing her fingers around it. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll keep it." Neither of them said anything else for a while. They just stood together in the quiet kitchen, exhausted, grieving, and unexpectedly, cautiously, a little less alone than they'd been an hour before. In the weeks that followed, the engagement's collapse became public in the careful, controlled way Ethan's PR team knew how to manage. A brief statement citing differences that emerged between Ethan and Vanessa, no mention of necklaces, letters, or maids. The tabloids speculated wildly anyway, as tabloids do, but without confirmation, the story eventually cooled into old news, replaced by whatever scandal came next in the endless news cycle of the wealthy. Inside the house, though, something quieter had begun to grow. Ethan and Maya found themselves gravitating toward the same late evening hours they'd once shared with Eleanor. Maya finishing her rounds around 9, Ethan finally closing his laptop after a day of meetings, the two of them ending up in the same sitting room more nights than either of them planned. They didn't talk about the necklace. They talked about Eleanor instead, stories Maya remembered that Ethan had never heard, moments from his childhood that Ethan shared that made Maya laugh for the first time in months. They talked about Caleb, Maya's brother, and Ethan surprised her one evening by asking detailed, genuine questions about his coursework, offering, carefully, without pressure, to connect him with an internship program at Cole Meridian if he was interested. "You don't have to do that," Maya said. "I know," Ethan replied. "I want to." It wasn't romantic, not exactly, not yet. It was something quieter than that. Two people who had both lost someone they loved, finding an unexpected kind of comfort in each other's company. Maya still called him Mr. Cole in front of guests and staff. He still knocked before entering rooms she was cleaning, still treated her with a careful respect that never assumed anything. But something was shifting, slowly, in the space between them. Not everyone was ready to let it shift in peace. Across town, Vanessa Hale was not taking her public humiliation quietly. Behind closed doors, in her family's penthouse, she sat across from her mother, Diane Hale, a woman whose entire social identity had been built around her daughter's now broken engagement to one of the most eligible men in the country. "This is not over," Vanessa said, staring out at the city skyline. "That housekeeper humiliated me in front of 300 people. I am not going to let her walk away with a diamond necklace and my fiancé while I become a punchline." "What exactly do you plan to do?" Diane asked carefully. "I plan," Vanessa said, turning back with a cold, determined look in her eyes, "to remind everyone exactly who Maya Bennett really is. Because I did some digging after that night, Mother. And I found something interesting about our little Cinderella." Diane raised an eyebrow. "What did you find?" Vanessa smiled, thin and sharp. "Enough to make sure nobody looks at her as an innocent little saint by the time I'm done." Back at the estate, unaware of the storm quietly gathering, Maya sat beside Ethan on the terrace one evening, watching the sun sink behind the manicured hedges, allowing herself, for the first time in a long while, to feel something close to peace. It wouldn't last. The invitation arrived 2 weeks later, a gala for the Cole Meridian Foundation's annual charity fundraiser, an event Ethan hosted every year, and one Maya had always helped organize from behind the scenes, never as a guest. This year, at Ethan's quiet insistence, that changed. "I want you there," he told her simply. "Not working it. Attending it." Maya had hesitated for days before agreeing, worried about exactly the kind of attention it might invite. She wasn't wrong to worry. The gala was held in the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel, 400 guests in formal wear, press photographers stationed along a step-and-repeat wall, cameras flashing as donors and socialites arrived. Maya wore a simple navy dress, nothing close to what the other guests wore, and stayed close to the edges of the room out of old habit, even with Ethan's hand occasionally finding the small of her back to guide her through introductions. It was going well, better than she'd expected, until Vanessa arrived. Nobody had invited her. But Vanessa Hale didn't need invitations to walk into rooms that used to be hers. She crossed the ballroom directly toward Maya and Ethan, trailed by a photographer Maya didn't recognize, flashbulbs already going off before Vanessa even opened her mouth. "Well," Vanessa said, loud enough for the surrounding cluster of guests to hear, "if it isn't Cinderella, all dressed up for the ball. Careful, sweetheart. Midnight comes for everyone eventually." "Vanessa," Ethan said, his voice low with warning. "This isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place." Vanessa's eyes stayed locked on Maya, sharp and triumphant. "Since everyone here seems to think you're some kind of saint who just happened to stumble into a dying woman's good graces, I thought they might like to know the truth about your father." Maya's stomach dropped. The room around them seemed to narrow. "Vanessa, don't," she said quietly. "Your father," Vanessa continued, raising her voice further, "left behind almost $40,000 in unpaid debts when he passed. Debts your family never repaid. Convenient, isn't it, that his daughter ended up cozied up to a billionaire's dying mother, walking away with jewelry and a fortune of her own? Sounds less like fate and more like a pattern." A ripple of whispers moved through the nearby guests. Cameras kept flashing. Maya felt her face burn, old shame and grief rising up together. The debts had been her father's mistakes, not hers, made during years of illness and desperation. Maya had spent her 20s quietly paying off piece by piece long after he was gone. It had never been anyone's business. Until now. "That's enough." Ethan's voice cut through the ballroom, sharp and final, drawing every nearby eye. "Vanessa, you need to leave." "Or what?" Vanessa's chin lifted, defiant even as her voice wavered slightly. "You'll have security remove me. Go ahead. Let everyone see exactly how far you've fallen, defending the help over the woman you were supposed to marry. Security, Ethan said, not looking away from Vanessa, will remove you because you were never invited, and because you just publicly humiliated a guest at my event with information that has nothing to do with her character and everything to do with your own bitterness. 2 security guards appeared at Vanessa's sides within moments, gently but firmly beginning to escort her toward the exit. She didn't fight them, but she didn't stay quiet either. "This isn't over, Ethan," she called back over her shoulder, her voice cutting through the murmuring crowd. "You have no idea what I know." The ballroom doors closed behind her, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Maya stood frozen, humiliated, tears burning at the edges of her eyes despite every effort to hold them back, 400 strangers now staring at her with a mixture of pity and curiosity she hadn't asked for and didn't know how to survive. Ethan found Maya 20 minutes later on the hotel's private terrace, where she'd fled the moment she could slip away from the ballroom unnoticed. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, staring out at the city lights, mascara streaked despite her efforts to wipe it away. "I'm so sorry," Ethan said, approaching slowly. "I should have seen that coming. I should have had better security at the entrance." "It's true," Maya said, not turning around. "Everything she said about my father, it's true. He left debts. I spent years paying them off quietly because I didn't want anyone to know, didn't want anyone looking at my family and seeing failure instead of just hard luck. And now 400 people think I'm exactly what she said. A gold digger who saw an opportunity in a dying woman's bedroom." "Nobody who actually knows you believes that," Ethan said. "It doesn't matter what people who know me believe," Maya said, finally turning, her eyes red-rimmed but steady. "It matters what 400 strangers with cameras believe. By tomorrow morning it'll be everywhere." Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, frowned, and answered. The call lasted less than a minute. When he hung up, his expression had changed entirely, something sharper, colder, moving beneath the surface. "That was my head of security," he said slowly. "He's been reviewing something for the past week, after I asked him to look into an odd discrepancy in the house's camera archives from around the time my mother passed. He just found footage." "Footage of what?" "Of Vanessa," Ethan said. "From the visit my mother mentioned in her letter. The house cameras in the main hallway caught part of it. No audio, but enough. Vanessa arriving unannounced, going upstairs to my mother's room, and coming back down 20 minutes later looking furious. And then, 3 days later, cameras caught her coming back a second time, a visit nobody told me about, where she was overheard by one of the night nurses making it very clear what she wanted from my dying mother." Maya's breath caught. "Ethan." "The nurse kept notes," Ethan continued, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Dated. Time-stamped. Vanessa told my mother, in almost exactly these words, that if Eleanor really cared about Ethan's happiness, she'd make sure Vanessa was financially protected regardless of what happened between us. She said it while my mother was recovering from a treatment that left her too weak to even sit up in bed." The city lights blurred slightly as Maya's eyes filled again, this time not from her own humiliation, but from a fresh wave of grief for Eleanor, imagining her lying there, exhausted and dying, being pressured for money by the woman engaged to her only son. "What are you going to do?" Maya asked quietly. "I already did it," Ethan said. "I sent the nurse's notes and the security footage to 3 major outlets an hour ago, along with a statement. Not to punish her out of spite. Because she stood in a ballroom tonight and tried to destroy your reputation using information about your father's debts, which you spent years quietly repaying with your own hard work. She doesn't get to do that and walk away clean while hiding what she actually did." Maya said nothing for a long moment, absorbing the weight of it all. "This is going to be everywhere by morning," she finally said. "Yes," Ethan agreed. "But this time, it'll be the truth. All of it. Not just the parts that make you look guilty." The story broke before sunrise, exactly as Ethan predicted, though not in the way either of them fully anticipated. It wasn't a scandal about a billionaire and his maid. It became, almost overnight, a story about a dying woman's final wish, a devoted caregiver who never asked for anything, and a fiancée whose true character had been quietly documented by hospital staff long before she ever stood in a ballroom throwing stones. The public reaction surprised Maya more than anything. Instead of judgment, she found something closer to warmth. Strangers online sharing their own stories of caregivers who'd shown up for their families in ways money could never repay, of the quiet dignity in work that so often goes unseen. Vanessa's own reputation, meanwhile, collapsed swiftly and publicly, her family's hotel brand issuing careful statements distancing themselves from the controversy, old friends and society columns turning sharply against her almost overnight. 3 weeks after the gala, Maya sat with Ethan on the same terrace where she'd first cried in front of him, though the mood between them now was entirely different. Quieter, gentler, no longer weighed down by scandal or grief hanging over every conversation. "I keep waiting to feel like this is a mistake," Maya admitted, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft orange. "Like any day now, everything's going to fall apart again." "It's not a mistake," Ethan said. "None of this happened the way anyone planned. Not my mother's illness, not the will, not any of it. But you and me, sitting here right now? That part isn't a mistake, Maya. That part is just true. People are still going to whisper," she said, "about the maid who ended up with the billionaire's fortune and his heart." "Let them whisper," Ethan said, taking her hand gently in his. "My mother spent her whole life surrounded by people who cared more about appearances than character, and in the end, the one person who never once performed for an audience was you. I'm not interested in hiding something that's real just because it makes a better headline for someone else's imagination." Maya smiled, small and genuine, the kind of smile that had been rare on her face for months. "Your mother would have loved watching you finally stand up for something instead of just running a company. She'd have loved watching you finally let someone take care of you for once," Ethan said. "For 18 months, you took care of everyone else. I think it's someone else's turn now." For the first time since the necklace had been clasped around her neck in that chaotic foyer, Maya let herself believe, fully and without reservation, that this wasn't a scandal she'd stumbled into. It was simply the quiet, unglamorous beginning of something real. 1 year later, the Cole estate looked much the same from the outside. The same sweeping staircase, the same manicured grounds, the same marble foyer where everything had once fallen apart in front of 300 stunned party guests. But inside, everything had changed. Maya no longer wore a uniform in that house, though she still visited nearly every day, now as the director of the Eleanor Cole Caregiving Foundation, a non-profit she and Ethan had built together using part of the trust Eleanor left her, dedicated to supporting and training home caregivers across the country, and offering scholarships to their children, the way Maya wished someone had helped her and Caleb all those years ago. Caleb, now finishing his degree with the help of the internship Ethan had quietly arranged, often joked that his sister had somehow ended up in the middle of a movie plot. Maya usually just laughed and reminded him that real life didn't work out this cleanly for everyone, and that was exactly why the foundation mattered. Because most caregivers who showed up quietly, day after day, never got a necklace, a letter, or a happy ending. They just got tired, and underpaid, and unseen. Ethan had changed too, in ways long-time colleagues noticed but couldn't quite articulate. A little less armored, a little more willing to sit in a meeting and actually listen instead of just deciding. He credited it, when pressed, to 2 women, his mother, who taught him to pay attention, and Maya, who taught him what paying attention actually looked like when it was real. They married quietly the following spring. No press wall, no step and repeat, just close friends, Caleb standing beside Maya, and one empty chair at the front reserved, everyone understood without needing to say it, for Eleanor. Maya wore the necklace that day. Of course she did. As for Vanessa, she eventually left the city altogether, rebuilding a quieter, more private life far from the cameras that once seemed to follow her everywhere. Whatever anger she carried, whatever regret, remained hers alone to sit with, a reminder, if nothing else, that character eventually surfaces, no matter how carefully it's hidden behind a beautiful dress. If there's one thing this story leaves behind, it's this. The world rewards performance so often that we forget to notice the people who never perform at all, the ones who show up, quietly, day after day, expecting nothing in return. Sometimes, if we're lucky, someone finally notices. And sometimes, that noticing changes everything. Eleanor Cole spent her final months surrounded by wealth that could buy almost anything, except the one thing she wanted most. Someone who cared for her simply because it was right, not because of what she could give in return. She found that in Maya. And in the end, it was the truest gift she had left to give. If this story moved you even a little, hit like before you go. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need a story like this today. Subscribe if you want more stories exactly like this one. And if you know someone who could use a little hope right now, share this with them. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness is the one that changes everything. Thank you for staying until the end. I'll see you in the next story.